Well,
Welcome back, everyone. A very good afternoon. And I'm sure you all have gone through the poster 1 and poster 2 session. Very interesting happenings throughout the day. And just as I was we are getting on to this session, the panel discussion, I got a WhatsApp forward which says that 2 Indian turtles facing high risk of extinction have been added to the list of threatened species during the CITES conference, which is presently or I think just ongoing. So Shriparna and Sneha, if you're around, I guess you can add that to your information bit. Well, welcome again. And we have this excellent panel discussion, conversations on the language of citizen science. And we have 3 excellent panelists with us today. We have Anita Varghese, a good old friend of mine. Anita is the Director of Biodiversity at the Keystone Foundation, and she has done her studies at the University of Hawaii on the impact of resin harvesting on the ecology of Canarium strictum and endemic tree. Also explored the traditional ecological knowledge of forest-dependent indigenous communities of the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. Last year, we had some wonderful women who spoke at the conference, the Barefoot Ecologist, a region which is her home since 3 decades, the NBR that is. Her interest is in community-based bioecological monitoring, field ecology, coupled with knowledge and sensitivity of indigenous people's practices and lifestyles. She is a founder member of the Nilgiri Natural History Society and Western Ghats plant specialist group of the IUCN SSC. Welcome, Anita, and we are dying to listen to you. The second panelist today with us is Ramnarayan Ram. Everybody calls him Ram, and he is from Uttarakhand, lives in Uttarakhand rather, works in the remote Greater Himalayan Gori River Valley region, which is located in Pithoragarh district. He's a founder of a nascent community science initiative for conservation and education in biodiversity, climate change, and natural history under the aegis India's Nature. His principal role is that of a community mobilizer, natural history and climate change educator, along with being an advocate of community rights and environmental justice. So welcome, Ram. We are all waiting to listen to you. And finally, we have Taukeer. And interestingly, Taukeer, we are all waiting to listen to your panel, part of the panel discussion. Taukeer Alam Lodha is a nature guide in Uttarakhand. I've heard so much about him. And together with the Nature Science Initiative, he conducts research on wildlife and awareness campaigns in rural and urban schools. He belongs to the forest-dwelling nomadic community of Van Gujjars of Rajaji National Park. Taukeer always felt close to nature, but emphasizes that he truly understood it due to the education he received after he and his family were relocated outside the park. His main interest lies in bird watching, field ecology, and in raising awareness about nature conservation among rural youth. He has made his way to 5th place in the state with 463 bird sightings. That's amazing, Taukeer. Bahut badhiya. And his journey has made him one of the most sought after birders in Uttarakhand. So Taukeer, नमस्कार. आप आए हैं इतनी दूर से और आपकी अगर सिग्नल थोड़ी अच्छी है तो आप अपना कैमरा एक बार के लिए ऑन कर लीजिए ताकि सब लोग आपको पहचान सके और उसके बाद आप बंद करके बात कर सकते हैं. तो नमस्कार Taukeer, welcome to the panel discussion, and I will hand over to Anita to take this panel discussion forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having me back in this conference. I enjoyed being last year, and I'm happy to be here this year too. And I'm happy to be here with Ram and Taukeer in preparation for this panel. We met up a couple of times, and I learned so much. And there was such a lot of synchrony in what we're doing in different parts of the country. And I think this conference is doing a great job of bringing those pieces from all across the country together. And there's so much happening in the sphere of citizen science. It's really encouraging because, like 15 years back when we started to work on this aspect of citizen science, we always called our program the Barefoot Ecology Program. And that was when we're, as ecologists, when we're out there studying the system, looking at forest dependent communities, assessing the ecology of the forest, it was very important for us to have our community people participate because, um, you know, everything is so project bound. When you come out of the project, who are the actual stakeholders? Who are the people who are getting into the conservation action? When all of these questions come at you as an ecologist, you see how important it is to work alongside with communities. That journey started for us through this program called Barefoot Ecology. And it also brought to us this very important aspect because we are working here in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve with indigenous communities, communities who have lived in these landscapes for centuries, who have a much deeper knowledge of the landscape than we who've come in the short term. So, how do we then bring together the traditional ecological knowledge that communities have, and how do we work together to combine this for understanding the ecosystem? So, that's where our Barefoot Ecology program started off with. Farida mentioned that last year, we had our women barefoot ecologists talking in the conference last year. Bringing women into the program was a conscious thing that we had to do and make resources for and allowances for. The men were willing to be part of the program and always came forward when it had to do with monitoring forests. If we wanted women to participate and to understand what women's knowledge were, we also had to moderate the question. We had to change the question because the women were not going into the forest as much as the men. Therefore, they stayed out of it if we said we're monitoring forests. But when we started to say, let's look at the agroforestry system, let's look at the diversity in your agricultural lands, that's when a lot of women started to participate. And therefore, our Barefoot Ecology program was able to include women. In this journey of those several years, what we've also seen is that, of course, increasing participation, increasing the diversity of the participants, asking questions that are relevant and important to that landscape and to that community has been a big part of our program. And I think that has been the key of getting this participation on board. How do we ask questions that are not driven from one side, but are also driven from the communities that are equal stakeholders in this landscape? So when Ram, Taukeer, and I decided on this title of the language of citizen science, we also decided on this term language not to imply the identity part of it or the language that that is going around. I mean, it's not about which language will these apps be designed or the forms. It's really language as a metaphor for inclusivity, for participation, and not necessarily identity. Language is a metaphor for diversity, for cultures, for landscapes where citizen science has not yet reached, and for questions that are not only driven from one side of the spectrum, but questions that are also bubbling up from the ground and the landscape. How is citizen science poised to take up those questions? So this is what we were thinking about when we decided on this title and decided that this is the kind of conversations we had. Having said this about the Barefoot Ecology program that we have in the Nilgiris, I think today what we have is maybe over the years about 60 people who've been through this program, people from the community, people who have engaged with us in this journey. Today, they are also bringing forward questions. They are deciding, for instance, a couple of years ago, when the floods hit parts of Kerala and Nilambur, it was the community's question that they would like to work on understanding the dynamics of the river. So how do we start an ecological monitoring of the river? And how do we bring in stories that the elders have about the rivers? How do we bring in the women's knowledge about the fishes in the river, or the children that know about all the different fishes that are in the rivers? So how do different aspects of the community's knowledge come into this monitoring program? So I think over the years, including different sections of society and finding ways to answer questions that are important to the community from that landscape that they are has been a big part of our program. And I'd like to, maybe this is something that Ram and Taukeer also would like to share their stories at, but how we sort of have questions and communities being part of our program. So maybe over to you, Ram, for now.
Ram can't hear you.
Okay. Ram, I think we're having some.
Are you able to hear us?
Ram, I can't hear you. Can't
Ram,
hear you, Ram.
Can you unmute yourself? Or
I think yes, probably a technical glitch. Not able to hear you, Ram.
thank you.
I think his audio is not working. Maybe he has to log out and join in again or use some other audio. Ram?
Okay. It was all working till
I think his audio is not picking up his signal.
So तौकीर, आप बताना चाहेंगे अपने आपकी जो जर्नी रही है अब तक, और आप कैसे लोगों को इन्वॉल्व कर रहे हैं, कैसे ये सिटीजन साइंस के साथ आप कैसे इनको लोगों का इन्वॉल्वमेंट के साथ डील कर रहे हैं? तौकीर, आप सुन पा रहे हो?
हाँ, मैं सुन पा रहा हूँ। क्या आप सुन पा रहे हैं मुझे?
जी बिल्कुल।
सो मतलब मेरे पूर्वज पहले से ही जंगलों में रहते आए हैं, जैसा कि बताया गया इंट्रोडक्शन में कि नोमैडिक ट्राइब से बिलोंग करता हूँ मैं। सो 2000 में हमें राजाजी नेशनल पार्क से शिफ्ट कर दिया गया था एक गेंडी खाता बस्ती में, जहाँ पर मेरे परिवार को भी जाना पड़ा था। और उस दौरान जब नेशनल पार्क बना तो उस दौरान राजाजी में काफ़ी सारे राजाजी नेशनल पार्क में इकोलॉजिकल प्रोजेक्ट्स जो थे चल रहे थे। अलग अलग मुद्दे होते थे रिसर्च के, सीड डिस्पर्सल पे या फिर पॉलिनेशन पे। तो एक प्रोजेक्ट था 2012 में जिसमें मैं जुड़ा एज अ कुक। मैं वहाँ पे गया था। तो प्रोजेक्ट था कि सीड डिस्पर्सल कैसे होता है, जानवरों के थ्रू कैसे होता है, पक्षियों के थ्रू कैसे होता है, और वो कितने एरिया में उसको डिस्पर्स करते हैं। तो उसी प्रोजेक्ट के साथ जब मैं जुड़ा तो तब मेरा मतलब पहले से ही मैं जंगलों में पला बड़ा हुआ, तो इंटरेस्ट था फौना फ्लोरा में। लेकिन जब इकोलॉजिकल रिसर्चर लोगों के साथ जुड़ा, उनके साथ डिस्कस होने लगे, पक्षियों के रोल समझ में आए कि हाँ, एक छोटा सा वॉबलर कैसे माइग्रेट करके आता है, वो अपने वेट से ज़्यादा कैसे खाता है, एक बीज फैलाने में एक पक्षी कैसे सहायक होता है, एक हॉर्नबिल कैसे नेस्टिंग करता है, उसका एक दूसरे पे कितना ट्रस्ट होता है। और मेरा इंटरेस्ट बढ़ता गया इस सब में। तो इसी दौरान मतलब एक दिन रिसर्चर आई थी जो प्रोजेक्ट को लीड कर रही थी। तो मेरा सवाल था उनसे कि जो ये सब हम रिसर्च कर रहे हैं, जानकारियां जो निकल रहे हैं, इसका होने वाला क्या है अंत में? उन्होंने बोला कि ये संरक्षण के काम आएगा, और ये संरक्षण जो है जंगल को बचाने और इसमें काम आएगा। तो मैंने बोला ये सब डाटा जाएगा कहाँ? तो उन्होंने बोला कि यूनिवर्सिटीज में जाएगा थीसिस बन के, या गवर्नमेंट को इसका रिपोर्ट जाएगा। तो तब मेरा सवाल था कि जरूरत तो ये है कि जो वहाँ के लोकल के लोग हैं उनको ये सब पता होना चाहिए कि एक छोटा सा पक्षी है वो कितना इम्पोर्टेंट है हमारे। और उस दौरान उन्होंने बोला कि फिर मतलब कैसे किया जा सकता है। तो मैंने बोला कि अच्छा ये होगा कि हम स्कूलों में जाएं और अपने ये जो जो जंगल में सीखते हैं इसको आसान भाषा में बच्चों के साथ शेयर करें। तो तभी से मैं उन्होंने एक प्रपोजल बनाया और एक स्कूल प्रोग्राम शुरू किया हमने देहरादून और हरिद्वार में। तो मैं जो हम सीखते थे वो बच्चों को बताते थे कि एक पेड़ की कितनी सीक्रेट लाइफ है, वो कैसे जीता है, एक फिग का पॉलिनेशन कैसे होता है, कितना इंटरेस्टिंग है, वो सारी चीजें बताता गया। तो उसी दौरान कम्युनिटी से लोग मतलब जुड़ना शुरू हुए मेरे साथ, जो मेरी कम्युनिटी के थे। और तभी तभी तब ई बर्ड जो एक सिटीजन साइंस का प्लेटफॉर्म है वो शुरू हुआ था। तो उस पर मैं अपना डाटा डालता था, घर पे होता तो रोज में दूरबीन लेके निकल जाता था, तो कुछ बच्चे मेरे साथ चले आते थे। तो ऐसे करके जो जो भी मेरे साथ आता था तो मैं उसको पक्षियों के बारे में बताता था, वो ई बर्ड का प्लेटफॉर्म जो है वो कैसे मदद करता है। एक बहुत अच्छा उदाहरण देता था मैं कि अगर वल्चर जैसे खत्म हुए हैं, हमें एंड में पता चला कि वल्चर खत्म हो गए, लेकिन अगर हम ये सिटीजन साइंस का जो प्लेटफॉर्म है, ई बर्ड है, अगर हम इसको यूज कर रहे होते बहुत पहले समय से और उसको मॉनिटर भी कर रहे होते हर साल की कैसे पॉपुलेशन डिक्लाइन हो रही है, तो शायद हम बहुत पहले समझ गए होते कि वल्चर का पॉपुलेशन कम हो रहा है, तो उस पर हम कुछ स्टेप ले सकते थे। फिर धीरे धीरे सीजन वॉच एक और सिटीजन साइंस प्रोग्राम है, उसमें मैं जुड़ा, बच्चों को मॉनिटरिंग में लेके जाना, वो सब ट्रीज को देखते हैं उसमें कि कब फल आ रहे हैं, कब उसमें पत्तियां आ रही हैं, क्या चेंजेस आ रहे हैं। तो इस तरीके से स्कूल के बच्चों को जोड़ता गया और फिर कम्युनिटी की स्टोरीज, फोक स्टोरीज वो लेके बच्चों के साथ में काम करता गया, यूथ को भी जोड़ा। लेकिन इन सब में मतलब लोग जुड़ते हैं एक बार और फिर चले जाते हैं। चैलेंज जैसे आया मेरे सामने कि ज्यादा लंबे जुड़ नहीं पाते हैं लोग। उसके साथ साथ एक और मतलब अभी कोविड के टाइम पे हमने एक काम शुरू किया कि मतलब एक एनजीओ था और वो चाहते थे कि मॉनिटरिंग हो कि कितना कितने लोग संक्रमित है, और एक और था कि वाटर टेस्टिंग, उसको देखा जाए कि गांव में वाटर टेस्टिंग कितना है। तो हमने वो भी यूथ के साथ शुरू किया। तो जब मैं देखता हूँ कि पक्षियों का डाटा ईबर्ड पे हो या सिटीजन साइंस का वो सीजन वॉच का डाटा हो, उसमें कितने लोग पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं, और जो कोविड के टाइम का डाटा है लिया हुआ है, और जो वाटर टेस्टिंग का डाटा है उसमें लोग कितना इंथुजियास्टिक यानी कितना इंटरेस्ट लेके जुड़ रहे हैं, तो ये देख समझ में आया कि जितने भी यूथ हैं या लोग हैं वो उस मतलब जो कोविड के टाइम का डाटा था या वाटर टेस्टिंग का डाटा था उसमें ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट ले रहे थे। तो उसमें ये भी समझ में आया कि वो लोग उस वो सिटीजन साइंस का काम करना ज्यादा पसंद कर रहे हैं, जितना मुझे समझ में आया। जो कॉज एकदम सीधा दिखाई दे रहा है कि कोविड का हम टेस्ट ले रहे हैं, उसमें समझ में आ रहा है कि इतने लोग संक्रमित हैं तो इनको इलाज के लिए भेजे जाए, या पानी इतना खराब है हमारे यहाँ का तो इसको सही किया जाए। तो लोग इस भावना के साथ जुड़ रहे थे। पर जो सिटीजन साइंस मैं बोलूँ, जो ईबर्ड का डाटा है और जो सीजन वॉच का डाटा है, उसमें लोग इतना नहीं जुड़ पा रहे हैं क्योंकि वो सीधा व्यक्ति से जुड़ा हुआ नहीं दिखता है। तो लोग करते हैं, छोड़ देते हैं। और ईबर्ड में मैंने खासकर देखा जो प्रोफेशनल लोग हैं, जो उस डाटा को यूज करके अपना प्रचार प्रसार कर रहे हैं, तो वो लोग कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं, लेकिन ज्यादातर लोग उसको छोड़ रहे हैं। तो इस तरीके के चैलेंज और वो भी देखने में आए कि ये क्यों हो रहा है और क्यों नहीं हो रहा है। और इस तरीके से समझ में आया कि लोग क्यों कर रहे हैं सिटीजन साइंस को, और फिर जो सिटीजन साइंस है उसको क्यों करेंगे लोग, एक ये सवाल फिर मन में खड़ा हुआ कि जो अगर कोई मैं किसी को बोलूं कि आप किसी मेरा ये प्रोजेक्ट है इसको आप कर दीजिए, तो कोई क्यों करेगा? किस गांव में स्पेशली ट्राइबल लोगों के पास या विलेजर लोगों के पास इतना टाइम होगा क्या? उनको करने की क्या वजह है? तो क्यों वो करेंगे ये सब? तो इस तरह के चैलेंज देखने को मिलते हैं और सवाल खड़े होते हैं। इतना ही था। जी।
Dhanyawad, Taukeer. Ram, are you there? Are you able to hear us?
Ram, are you able to?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you,
Yes.
Ram.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we
I
can.
joined with a second device so that whatever overcome the tech issues. So I'll quickly summarize what Taukeer said based on what I heard and an earlier conversation we had. When he was very young, his family was relocated from inside the new Rajaji National Park to the outskirts to currently a place called Gendi Kata, where he then got, basically their family were living outside the national park away from their traditional livelihoods of animal herding. From then, while he was a young boy, he was only educated till class 8. And he desperately wanted to leave home so that he didn't need to do traditional home stuff. So he joined a couple of researchers doing some research, new research in the Rajaji National Park as a research, as a field assistant, initially as a cook. And then later on, when they figured that his cooking skills weren't great, they said, why don't you just join us and do some research work in the forest area. So he started working with them and documenting whatever the researchers were documenting, and also learning very fast. He took those learnings and he started to also explore what he could do with the learnings and asking certain questions, basically examining the secret life of trees and secret life of birds. He was given a binoculars, or he got a binoculars, and he used to go out on bird walks. He learned how to use some citizen science tools, especially like eBird, and later on Season Watch. And he, as already shared by Farida, he's one of the best bird watchers in Uttarakhand. And I would like to add over here from my side, one of the best ethical bird watchers in Uttarakhand. So he used to go out walking with his binoculars, and he used to be accompanied by children, and he would share with them what he is seeing. And this, over a period of time, became institutionalized. And through the groups that he's working with, as well as with his own clan and his brothers and cousins and everybody, they got together and they started to work with children who don't traditionally go to a normal school. So they started to explore about trees using Season Watch, about birds using eBird, and other associated material that is available over there. Later on, when Corona happened, they used similar techniques of citizen science to go house to house to figure out who was unwell and what could be done. And similarly, they used this collective energy to also test for water in their particular region. He had a few questions which I would like to pose to the rest of the group that is listening, and also to Anita, so that she can respond. Is that sustaining interest in citizen science is very difficult, especially when you're talking of a group of tribal people who are in survival mode, and when they don't see a clear-cut agenda, they don't see a clear-cut benefit from participating in citizen science. So how does one overcome that particular issue, especially when they are very poor and they don't really have the time to actually participate in citizen science events more than, and very, randomly, or when there's an event or something like that is fine, but sustain it over a period of time. I hope I've managed to cover what Taukeer said in greater detail, but for now I'll just leave it here. And I'll go back to Anita so that she can take one of these questions, and then later on I'll join in again.
Okay, thanks, Ram. So I think in this question, I think Taukeer also mentioned this thing, that the relevance of the question, when there's some social good or a social cause, then people are able to relate to the question and are willing to be part of it, whether it was water testing, or in our case, monitoring landslides or disasters, natural disasters that happen. And I think one is, paying for the time of people to be part of these programs. The other is also training people. I think very often we just spend much less time than we should. I think there should be more resources allocated to training. It's also a process of education and awareness. Like, why is this question important? Why are migratory species important? Why is phenology important? There's a whole sort of awareness and training that needs to be invested before we start to collaborate on citizen science projects with communities. And definitely the question of time. How do we compensate for their time? Because if we don't, I don't think we can take this forward with communities for whom daily wages or are an important part of their life. So I definitely think this kind of an inclusive citizen science model needs to talk about more resources to be allocated. Yeah. So, but Ram, I also wanted to just say that when Taukeer talked about this, getting citizens involved or community people involved when the question has something to do directly with a benefit to their lives and livelihoods. I think also we got to be clear about the objectives of our citizen science project. And recently, we've been involved with a team from the University College London, and it's called an Extreme Citizen Science Project that really puts communities at the center of the program, and therefore the questions come from them. The design of the questionnaire, the design of the whole approach comes from discussions, multiple consultations with communities, wherein then the whole charter for the program is set. It's been an exciting journey, and the program is also called Excitees. And that has been an exciting journey for us to be part of this program that understands. And there, Professor Mukhi, he asks a very important question about the definition of citizen science and how we could try to understand what those objectives are. There could be political objectives, there could be scientific objectives, or there could be a social objective. So having that notion up ahead in our citizen science program would help us make it more inclusive. Yeah? So I just want to stop at that. And then, Ram, please tell us your story and take some of these interesting conversations forward.
Thank you, Anita. Sorry for this tech issue, but I'm guessing you can hear me now. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is interesting, and before I talk about what I'm doing and where I see things progressing, I just wanted to talk about the definition that you just spoke about citizen science. I was reviewing some literature truthfully for this presentation, and I just came across this one definition that was described, which describes citizen science refers to volunteers who participate as field assistants in scientific studies. This is from 2008. Of course, it's really old, and a lot of changes have come there. But I think that, as a group, we need to redefine citizen science. And we also have to differentiate between volunteerism and citizens participating in projects. I mean, if you look at volunteerism, it's something that is driven by a certain group of people, and especially when we talk of context. I'm talking of now Uttarakhand and the area where I am. There is a culture, and this is across rural communities, at least as far as I know in India. The word may differ. Here it's called Shramdan, which is a translation of the word volunteer. But in the cultural context, Shramdan is very different. There are very clear norms about what Shramdan is and who should be doing it and when it should be done. And Shramdan extends to great economic benefits. You sow together, you harvest together, you carry your cow dung together to the fields. The Shramdan extends to religious and cultural functions like death ceremonies and birth ceremonies and marriages and things like that. So the concept of volunteering or Shramdan already exists in communities. But then you take the middle class definition of volunteering. It is people who have resources at their disposal. We know from examples of US, where now US people pay to be volunteers, and they pay to go to organizations to volunteer to do, rural upliftment. I am volunteering for a rural upliftment project. So there I find this gap where when we expect, and my perspective is from a rural communities side. I'm not talking of scientists who are educated and who've come through a system of education which is well supported and well resourced. I work with people who are poorly educated and who don't have any resources and who don't have any support structure to support their outside their livelihood actions. And I think these are the kinds of communities that Taukeer is working with and Anita is working with. They don't have time. And even in that group, who are the people who have time? They are either young children who are in school, or people who are unemployed and they have a certain interest in joining a citizen science project. It will give them some promotion, it will give them some social media coverage, and it may lead to future employment opportunities. So when we talk about citizen science project, and again, I want to put a lens over here, I'm talking in the context of natural history, biodiversity conservation, and environmental issues. The gamut of citizen science for health and other issues is very big. So my focus and my lens is very small over here. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. And to take off from there as to what I'm doing, I wanted to share a story from many years back, and it involves Prabhakar. He had come from some place, Anand, Gujarat, and he installed Linux on one of our old PC computers. And it was just a command line terminal. And he said, there's this great open source thing, you should use it and all that. We tried it and we didn't like it. It took us 5 years to appreciate open source. And that was really my first introduction to, communication, where a casual user could be in touch with a very senior developer, which is what we are seeing now in citizen science portals. So you can imagine a person sitting in a remote area in Himalaya can reach out to a developer of a software and ask them certain questions. That kind of connection is what citizen science is bringing to us. So today, a person who's interested in beetles in India can reach out to, say, a beetle scientist in the Museum of Natural History in England, which has amongst the greatest collection of beetles. So this connection between a person who is not a scientist to a serious scientist is the bridge that we have to strengthen, and we have to make sure it's make it possible for many more people in less privileged communities to be able to access. And what I've done in the last 2-3 years is actually mentor about 8 or 10 people, provide them resources, binoculars, books, in some cases cameras, and also support them financially so they can spend time to just go out and explore nature. And some of the results are quite interesting because they are working in areas that are not traditionally they're not the eagle nests and the Jim Corbett's and the Mudumalais of India. They are areas where scientists biodiversity scientists don't like coming to, because infrastructure is poor and it doesn't have a history of biodiversity. But in those places, we are coming across new records, birds and butterflies seen after over 100 years, and all because these people are out there. They have some amount of training and some amount of appreciation for what they are seeing, and they know when they see something rare. They have much sharper eyes than any of us because they've lived in that environment, and now they're able to recognize certain things with a filter of natural history added on. And the progression I see is that these people can then become what you once said, climate change and environmental opinion leaders in their community, because they then have an understanding of their community and the difficulties they're going through, and at the same time they're able to communicate to the community and to the wider world about the rich biodiversity that exists over there. So I'm going to stop here and go back to Anita and Taukeer and ask them for more. Yeah.
So, Ram, interesting. I was just dying to ask this question to you. So, when we are talking about this inclusive citizen science and what you described, of this developer sitting somewhere else and, listening to the question of somebody who's living in a forest, it's a fantastic reality. And I find that fascinating that we've been able to bridge that gap. But we're also talking about power dynamics here. So how do we then ensure that these communities are also in a position to talk about collaboration, about co-creating the research, about authorship, about data sharing? What are we going to do proactively to make that happen? Do you have any thoughts or experiences on that, Ram? I was thinking.
Yeah, interesting question. I'll answer and then I'll ask Taukeer to step in and answer also. Just as an example, today in today's event, I did a count. There are a total of 22 women who are participating either as an organizer or as a panelist or as a speaker, and about 18 men. The reason I say this is I did this last year also, and I just looked at who was presenting. You just talk about women in rural India. There are huge number of difficulties for women to participate in citizen science. The first being, of course, social issues of women, participating in non-livelihood based activity. Because without women in Uttarakhand, in rural Uttarakhand, without women in a family, their entire agriculture-based, dairying-based livelihood would just collapse. So where are the women? And from what I've tried to work in these areas, it's very difficult to get women to join. That is where we need to step in with resources and support. We need more women mentors on the ground working with women from communities. You can imagine women who spend hours in the forest collecting fuel wood, collecting leaf litter, collecting fodder. They are in a position to observe nature like nobody else, but they don't have the time to do that because they're busy with their own lives. So I find that, to answer your question, one is that we need more resources in less privileged communities, whether it's urban less privileged communities or rural less privileged communities. We need more resources. We need more people to be mentors and to be here as in rural areas, not be in their institutions. We need them to come out and work together. Then once we start that process, then we can help communities to understand what are the tools that are available, and maybe then we'll come across them asking certain questions where they can design their own questions, they can design their own way of monitoring and data collection, and design even do their own analysis. And there are a variety of examples that I worked with. Maybe later on I'll share. And maybe now Taukeer, आप थोड़ा बता सकते हो कि ये जो मुश्किल है गांव समुदाय को जोड़ने के लिए, हम इसके बारे में हम क्या कर सकते हैं?
सो जैसे मैं देखता हूँ अपने एरिया में जहाँ पे मैं रहता हूँ गुज्जर बस्ती, तो शुरू में मैं जब यूथ के साथ जुड़ा और बर्ड वॉचिंग के लिए जाता था, तो लगभग 2.5 से 3 किलोमीटर का ट्रेल है जिसमें हमने 250 प्रजातियां पक्षियों की देखी और लगभग 2400 के आसपास ई बर्ड की चेकलिस्ट उसमें हैं। लेकिन जब यूथ थे मेरे साथ तो ई बर्ड भी कर रहे थे और मेरे साथ आते भी थे, लेकिन जैसे जैसे उनकी जिम्मेदारियां बढ़ी तो स्टेप बैक करते गए। मतलब अब वो काम पे जाने लगे हैं या फिर शादी हो गई है या मजदूरी करने जा रहे हैं। तो ऐसा ही एक उदाहरण मैंने देखा कि 2019 में नेचर गाइड तैयार करने का एक ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम चला देहरादून लैंडस्केप में, और उत्तराखंड के और बाकी लैंडस्केप में भी था, पर देहरादून लाल डांगन झील में मैं कोऑर्डिनेट कर रहा था। तो लगभग 30 पार्टिसिपेंट्स हमारे साथ जुड़े। तो मैं उनके साथ हर हफ्ते फील्ड पे जाता था, पूरा ई बर्ड के बारे में बताता था कि ये सिटीजन साइंस का टूल है, ये कैसे साइंटिस्ट को हेल्प करता है, एनवायरनमेंट के लिए कैसे मदद करता है, हमारे लिए कैसे अच्छा है। तो शुरू में लोगों ने लॉग इन किया और उसको यूज करना शुरू किया। लेकिन अगर अभी हम देखते हैं तो लगभग 2 या 3 ऐसे पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं जो कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं। वो इसलिए कर रहे हैं क्योंकि उन्होंने नेचर गाइड का काम अपनाया है। मतलब जिन लोगों ने काम छोड़ दिया है नेचर गाइड का, वो ट्रेनिंग खत्म हो गई है, वो कुछ और कर रहे हैं प्रोफेशनली, वो तो नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। तो मुझे लगता है कि लाइवलीहुड जो है, अगर वो उसके साथ जुड़ा हुआ है और फिर एक आसान भाषा में जो टूल्स हैं हमारे, लोकल भाषा में हो, फिर उसको यूज करने के तरीके हों, वो पहुंचाया जाए और उसका कॉज जो है बहुत सीधा सीधा जुड़ा हुआ हो, या तो फिर वो लाइवलीहुड के साथ जुड़ा हुआ हो, मुझे जैसा लगता है अभी तक के एक्सपीरियंस से, या फिर वो जैसे मैंने देखा कि कोविड के दौरान या वाटर टेस्टिंग के दौरान वो एक भावना थी कि कम्युनिटी के लिए अच्छा काम हो रहा है। तो ऐसी चीजें हो तो बढ़ सकता है, मतलब ऐसा मुझे पास्ट एक्सपीरियंस से लगता है जी।
थैंक यू तौकीर, मैं जल्दी से ट्रांसलेट कर दूंगा। Taukeer says that in response to the question about how to keep people engaged, he says that he gave an example of the area that he lives in, Gujjar Basti, where around 2018-19 in that area, in that time, they had a 2 to 3 kilometer birding trail. And they have 2,400 checklists. You can probably go on to eBird and check the checklist and the diversity of birds over there. So initially, there were a lot of young people who would join him on that particular trail. But as their responsibilities increased, as they got older, as they had responsibilities increased due to family commitments and survival, they gradually left. Later on in 2019, between 2019 and 21, there was a nature guide training program that was organized across Uttarakhand in 3 landscapes: Dehradun landscape, the Mussoorie Devalsari landscape, and the Mukteshwar landscape. Taukeer and I were, I'm adding to what he's saying, so you'll get an idea of also what he has said, that we were the lead instructors for this training program on natural history and nature guiding. In the Dehradun landscape that Taukeer was leading, there were about 30 people. And they used to come on weekly walks with him. He introduced them to citizen science tools like eBird. He introduced them to techniques of plant and bird watching, and generally how do you manage groups and guests, and the whole gamut of nature guiding was done. Of the 30 people, today only 2 or 3 are very active on citizen science platforms, mainly because that is now their livelihood. They work as nature guides. Totally in Uttarakhand at this point of time, there were about 75 people who joined courses in these 3 locations. And I want to point out very importantly, there were only 4 women who joined. 1 woman in the Devalsari Mussoorie landscape and 3 women in the Mukteshwar landscape. At the end of it today, I cannot say about the Mussoorie landscape how many people are involved, but in the Mukteshwar landscape also, only out of 25, only 2 or 3 have joined, are continuing to be part of citizen science, using citizen science apps like iNaturalist or eBird, mainly because their livelihood is driven by it. The rest have learned a lot, and they've gone on to do other things in their own life. Some of them are farmers, some of them run nature camps, and they use their skills over there. But what is sad in this particular situation is that of the 4 women, none of them completed the course. One was too far away. She couldn't travel because of COVID. One dropped out because she was interested in pursuing some other adventure activity. And 2 didn't have the financial support even for a day, 1 day a week, to be able to leave their homes and come. So that's just one of the challenges. And this is where I say that, one is we can think of bulk resources to do broad nature education programs. That is one strategy. But it will inform a whole lot of people, but it will be peripheral information. The second is to intervene at the school levels and start working on a nature education curriculum. That is very difficult given how our school systems are designed. They're designed to produce, I don't know what they're designed to produce. They're just designed to produce literate people, not necessarily educated people. And the third is to have focused interventions with small communities. It needs more people on the ground. It also needs more resources. It's more expensive. It's the more expensive way of approaching. But my thinking is that if you have a few people who are educated within the community, that education then spreads within the community. They teach their children, they teach their young ones, and then it becomes part of their life. And we have that example in the village I live in, where since about 2011-12 we have had an active nature education program. And today, talking about birds and plants is common language within the village itself. Anita, does that answer some of what you asked?
Yeah. So Ram, I was both to Taukeer and to you. So when we are talking about okay, now here's collecting information, putting it up on a platform like eBird or Season Watch. So do you think sometimes, like in my experience, I felt that the language matters? Here I'm coming back to our title. When we're using local terminology, names of species, or characteristics that are in local language, I feel women are less hesitant. And sometimes it's also the difficulty of learning English terms that has held women back. One is, in our specific example, when it had to do with the forest, women were less willing to come forward. But when it had to do with the agroforestry, women came forward. The language mattered. And a third aspect, I remember when we did the monitoring of the rivers, we tried this simple experiment. It was, another approach where we said, from a house, it was like a couple, a husband and wife team that went out. So there, the women and men went together. So there were different ways that we tried to get women into the focus of our programs. So that, and this also brings me to this question of, for instance, in our area, there are, we're working with about more than 10 different indigenous communities. Taukeer also knows we're talking about one Gujari, which does not have a script. None of the Adivasi languages have a script. So when you're talking about documentation in local languages, in local dialects, first of all, writing may be another skill that, therefore some people stay back, but also making it available in their own languages. And then when we started to get data in Toda, Irula, Kurumba, Sholega, and then the person who was managing the data thought, oh, let's just, put it all into Tamil or Malayalam or Kannada. And we sort of took a brush across all of these diverse languages and dialects and called it something that we were familiar with in Tamil or Kannada. So language, I think that way is also something that we should be more creative about and innovative in our approaches in this whole citizen science effort that we're all working in. And I think Taukeer refers to it because ye jo programs aap schools mein kar rahe wo one Gujari mein kar rahe honge na, like that is what brings the children also to understand this and to be part of these programs.
You're absolutely right, Anita. I'll speak and then I'll ask Taukeer to speak. I just want to share an example about. I know you have lots of examples, and also Yuan in the morning spoke about how the people on the Pulicat area have names for different types of mud under the sea. There's clay mud and the rocky mud and all that. I want to share an example that some years ago I was walking through a village with some friends, and my friend was very interested in seeing the white-crested laughing thrush. So we had some young men who I had known from earlier, and they were coming along with us, and we said we want to see this bird. So I didn't know the local name for that bird. So when we saw the bird, that fellow, the young man said, that's a ghatiyal. And ghatiyal, I asked him, what do you mean by ghatiyal? So in Uttarakhand, water mills that make flour are called ghats. And usually when a person goes in and grinds flour over there, they come out with the white powder all on their face. So he says that's why this bird is called ghatiyal, because it's got a white face. So for many years, I thought that was a actual local name. And only later on, I realized that this young man had made that name up on the spot. But as it happens, today we use this local name of ghatiyal as part of our names of birds. And there is a story that has been published with this name. There's a book on local folklore. And so this bird has got published in that book as well with this particular story. So, language evolves. Communities have, unless we learn their language and what they are seeing, and I, as an external person, as a person who's educated and can read Latin names more easily than I can read Hindi names, you are absolutely right. We need to learn to have a language that we've learned from the people who live in the landscape, and we need to figure out the connections and promote that much more, while providing them the tools to bridge the gap between English and scientific names and the local language and their interpretation. It's not just a name, it's also an interpretation. There's a story with it, and that story is what will have the connections that they are trying to share with us. तौकीर, ये सवाल ये था कि मतलब एक तो है जो हम लोग एप्स यूज करते हैं, हम जानकारी जो है वो किसी और के बनाए हुए ढांचे में हम डाल रहे हैं। और तो वो स्थिति कब आएगा जब जो गांव समुदाय है, जो आपका समुदाय या जिस समुदाय में हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं, वो खुद सवाल उठाएंगे और खुद उसका जवाब भी देंगे। क्या आपको लगता है कि ऐसे कभी होगा, और अगर होगा तो कब, और हमको क्या करना चाहिए उसके लिए?
आई थिंक लोकल भाषा और इसका आना बहुत जरूरी है। जैसे हमारी कम्युनिटी में भी आप देखेंगे, वन गुज्जर जो कम्युनिटी है, जंगल के साथ रिश्ता है, तो अलग अलग चीजों के अलग अलग नाम होते हैं। जैसे कोई एक वस्तु है, उसका शिवालिक हिल्स में अलग नाम है, उसी वस्तु का जब अल्पाइन मेडोज पे चले जाते हैं तो अलग नाम है उसका। उसके नाम के साथ उसके पीछे की पूरी कहानी छिपी हुई होती है, उसका पूरा ज्ञान उसके पीछे होता है। जैसे इंडियन कुक्कू जो होता है, उसकी आवाज़ सुन के हमारे लोग माइग्रेट करते हैं कि अब इंडियन कुक्कू जैसे बोलता है कि इंडियन कुक्कू ऐसे बोलता है, तो जो बुजुर्ग लोग हैं वो बोलते हैं कि ये बोला लोग को तौप, यानी लोगों धूप आ गई, अब माइग्रेशन करने का समय हो गया है। तो बायोडाइवर्सिटी को लेके, चीज़ों को लेके बहुत सारी जानकारी है जो बाहर के लोगों को, रिसर्चर को, जो सिटीजन साइंस के टूल बना रहे हैं, उनको पता नहीं है। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि कम्युनिटी के पास ज्ञान नहीं है या कम्युनिटी अशिक्षित है, इलिटरेट है। तो जिन लोगों के पास लिटरेसी है और जिनके पास रिसोर्सेज हैं, कम्युनिटी में जाएं और कम्युनिटी के साथ मिलें, जो उनका ज्ञान है उसका संरक्षण हो, फिर जो उनकी भाषा है, जो उनकी जानकारियां हैं बायोडाइवर्सिटी को लेके, उसको संरक्षित किया जाए और फिर कैसे मल्टीलिंगुअल टूल्स बनाए जाएं। तो ये एक मुश्किल काम है, बड़ा काम है, लेकिन ये होना बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि जैसे जैसे भाषाएं ख़त्म हो रही है या ज़माना बदलता जा रहा है, तो ये सारा ज्ञान, जो ये जानकारी है, वो बदलती जा रही है। से अभी एक बुजुर्ग से बात हो रही थी कि अब तो कुछ ऐसे सूचक थे जैसे कि सिकाड़ा की आवाज़ सुन के कि पेड़ की किस भाग पे ये पता लगाया जाता था कि बारिश कब होगी, कि अब ये बदलना शुरू हो गया है। अब काफ़ी सारे लोगों को पता नहीं है कि सिकाड़ा से हम अंदाजा लगा सकते हैं बारिश कब होने वाली है, और अब वो कभी भी बोलता है और कहीं भी बोलता है। तो ये भी समझ में आता है कि जो क्लाइमेट चेंज है उसका प्रभाव इन चीज़ों पे पड़ रहा है। तो ये सब क्लाइमेट चेंज बदल रहा है और ये सारी चीज़ें बदल रही हैं, उनको बदलने से पहले कैसे हम और उन लोगों के होते हुए जिनको ये जानकारी कैसे संरक्षित करें, और इसको भी एक बढ़ावा देना चाहिए। जो लोकल जानकारी और वो है उसको संरक्षित करके फैलाया जाए।
थैंक यू तौकीर, मैं आपके लिए जल्दी से ट्रांसलेट कर देता हूँ। सो तौकीर इज सेइंग दैट local language is very important, and the one Gujjar, for example, he gives an example of the one Gujjars, his community, that have different names for the same plant which is found at different altitudes. The same plant is called something else when it's in the plains and the Shivaliks, not the plains and the Shivaliks, and the same plant when they encounter it in the alpine areas where they migrate seasonally to, they have a different name for it. And each of these names has a story around it, and that story is very important to their understanding of their surrounding ecology. He also shares the example very wonderfully of the Indian cuckoo. And he says that when the local people in his community hear it, it means that the time has come for them to migrate up to the Alps. And so such things, he says, can't be communicated on citizen science platforms like eBird or iNaturalist. Of course, one can make notes, but systematically communicating this. One thing is to gather this knowledge for posterity's sake. The other is to keep it alive because it is useful to the community. And that is, he's saying, that is what is getting lost. He says that people are maybe illiterate. They may not know how to read and write, but they have a great appreciation for the knowledge of the forest, and they have a lot of knowledge about the forest. And that is the kind of language that is being lost. He also shares the example of cicadas, and that earlier when cicadas called, it meant that rain was going to come. But now, because of climate change, cicadas are calling all the time. So it's a clear indicator that something is wrong in the environment. So how do you capture this information? That is a question. And he thinks that maybe multilingual tools will help. But I'm not clear. I don't have an answer. It's going to need a lot of thought as to how do you code a culture, and how do you code the nuances of what people are talking about. Yeah, I'm going to stop here now and go back to Anita.
I guess, Anita, do you have any comments to make, or we can take some questions? We have quite a few.
Let's go for the questions, I think.
Okay.
As you'll see, Ram, Taukeer and me just love talking
Yes.
to each other.
तौकीर, आपके लिए काफी प्रशंसा आ रही है, और हमारे एक दोस्त निशान ने पूछा है कि जो जब भी आप बर्ड, आपके साथ में आपके समुदाय के जो यूथ है, उनको बर्ड वॉचिंग के लिए आप उनको उनके मन में जिज्ञासा ले आते हैं और उनको इंटरेस्ट करवाते हैं, तो व्हाट इज द स्टोरी? आप क्या कम्युनिटी की कोई फोक स्टोरी है या कोई कहानियां है जो बताकर इन यूथ लोगों को आप बर्ड वॉचिंग के लिए जागरूकता लेके आते हैं?
बिल्कुल, जैसे मैंने भी एक कहानी बताई कि कम्युनिटी एक पक्षी की वजह से माइग्रेट करती है। वो आके बोलता है कि आप अल्पाइन मेडोज पे चलेंगे, गर्मी हो गई है। सिकाडा है जो हमें बताता है कि कम्युनिटी जब अल्पाइन मेडोज पे होती है तो वहाँ पे सिकाडा कॉल करते हैं। तो जब अल्पाइन मेडोज पे अगर भैंसें हैं, एक कहानी है, तो अगर बारिश का मौसम है या फिर ओलावृष्टि होगी तो ये आवश्यकता होती है कि भैंसों को ट्री लाइन पे लेके आ जाए अल्पाइन मेडोज से। तो सिकाडा बता रहा है आपको कि बारिश होने वाली है, अपनी भैंसों को ट्री लाइन पे ले आइए ताकि बर्फबारी या फिर ओलावृष्टि उनको नुकसान ना पहुंचाए या उन पे प्रभाव ना डाले। तो अपनी भैंसों को बोलते हैं कि आज सिकाडा थोड़ा पेड़ के नीचे आके बोला तो नीचे ले जाइए ट्री लाइन पे। तो इस तरीके से और बहुत सारी फोक स्टोरियां हैं कि वुड पैकर कैसे बना, या फिर जब फ्रीज नहीं होते हैं हमारे घर में तो एक स्कॉप साउल बोलता था, उसके इंडिकेटर से जो दूध होता है उसको पानी में रखते हैं या हवा में रखते हैं। तो इस तरीके की जानकारी और बहुत सारे रिडल्स एंड प्रोवर्ब्स है जो बहुत डिटेल में फौना फ्लोरा को की व्याख्या करते हैं। जैसे पलाश के फूल के बारे में एक है कि तेरा थलाई काली क्यों मचाटा और टेशन टेढ़ा क्यों। तो पहले पूछने वाला बोला है कि जो तेरा निचला भाग है वो काला है और जो अंदर का लाल भाग है वो मुड़ा हुआ क्यों है, वो पलाश की पेट से बात कर रहा है। तो इस तरह की बहुत सारी जो पुरानी जानकारी है या फिर पारंपरिक ज्ञान है वो बहुत हेल्प करता है ये चीज़ों को ले जाने में। ऑफ कोर्स अभी लोग टूल से काफी प्रभावित होते हैं। जैसे ऑनेस्टली मैं कहूँ तो मैंने जब दूरबीन के थ्रू पक्षी को देखा था तो पक्षी तो था लेकिन दूरबीन वो मेरे लिए नया चश्मा था क्योंकि उससे पहले मैंने कभी देखा नहीं था। मैं बड़ा प्रभावित हुआ बहुत पास से पक्षी को देख के। ऐसे तो ऐसे टूल्स कई बार आपको प्रभावित कर देते हैं।
Thank you, Ram. Ram, would you like to translate? Thank you, Taukeer. Ram?
Yeah.
Sorry, two mics came on at the same time. I missed a little bit in between. Farida, may I request you to translate?
Yeah, okay, no problem. So basically, what Taukeer is saying that there are quite a few ways he relates with all the traditional knowledge which is available with the community already, whether it is a cicada, and then he's relating it to when he said Ola Brishti, and I assume Ola Brishti is hailstorm. So he's relating that how cicada and the hailstorms are related. So these kind of community stories which are already there. One of the other things he talked about Palash, and which is beauty, the flame of the forest tree. So how are those the already existing knowledge on these trees, and so I think that is what mostly he was trying to communicate, that these are the ones. And I think Nishant wanted to know about these kind of stories which are already existing. And I guess traditional knowledge is full of these kind of stories, and a lot of oral stories also exist, I guess. So that is what he uses. And one of the things he says, at the first time he used another chashma, and I like the word that he says was the durbin. So that is a binocular. So that is what also fascinated him initially. So this is what Taukeer wants to say. So
Thank you.
moving,
May I just add one thing? Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Ram.
Okay. I just wanted to corroborate something that Taukeer said with an example. Uttarakhand doesn't have a native population of yaks. When trade with Tibet was on, yaks used to come in from Tibet and they used to hybridize with cows. Local people still have a name for the 7 generations of hybrids that are there. And as per local knowledge, the 7th generation of hybrid goes back to being an almost pure yak. Today, most of these communities have abandoned yak hybridization for various reasons. And the newer people, the younger generation who are in the 30s, 40s and younger, do not know these names. They do not know this concept of hybridization and techniques. So I'm just giving that as an example of knowledge that will be lost forever for a community, because there's a change in their lives, in their local culture and in their traditional lives. So this is just one example of how loss is taking place. And we as people who are working with communities need to have tools to not just document them for posterity, but also keep it alive. And it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. So yeah, I totally appreciate what Taukeer said, and from an earlier conversation, what Anita had shared about the community that she's working with. Thank you.
Thanks, Ram. We are just over the clock by 3 minutes. One question which is asked from Ankila Hiremat, and that is the lack of participation by women primarily constrained by resources and the disproportionate burden they bear for keeping the household running? Or is there also a cultural element of what is acceptable for women to do? The question is to you, Ram.
Yeah, so I am checking it on Discord. Ankila, you're absolutely right. It's the first 2 parts are more relevant. Today, social acceptance for women to go out and work is much higher. So if there's an opportunity for them to earn a livelihood to do with anything else, women are doing all sorts of things. They are doing, things that they never traditionally did. So if there's an opportunity for them to earn a livelihood while contributing information and data gathering, it is possible for them. But there does have to be a network of people who support them. It's not going to be easy for women to leave their homes. It's still hard. Even I'm guessing that even for women in cities, it's hard for them to travel easily, and safety and all sorts of issues are over there. So for rural women, it's doubly hard. But if they are supported, they certainly will be able to partake of new opportunities, as well as contribute to a good set of data, like Anita's described earlier.
Thanks, Ram. I guess we can keep chatting up over Discord. We are 5 minutes behind the clock. So I will hand over this the platform back to Akshita to take it forward and keep the conversation going on Discord. And it was really fun being part of this panel. I hope thank all the panelists for such wonderful discussion, and we will see you again. Thank you. Over to you, Akshita.
Thank you so much, Farida. Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Taukeer, especially, and also Jennifer, who's been in the background translating for Ram. So thank you so much for joining us and all the participants. Maybe I would allow the organizing committee to say a few words. Anybody? Shannon, Suhail, Prabhakar?
I'll start since I'm unmuted. So I just wanted to thank everyone who joined us today as speakers, as poster presenters, as panel session members, and also everybody in the audience. For me, the highlight that I take away is that citizen science, the most important thing is actually the citizens and the participation of people. And we need to have more and more support for people to not only participate in these kind of efforts, but to gain capacity in doing this, and also things like translation of languages and all sorts of things. Because apps are great, but they don't replace people. So I want to thank all the people who have participated in this. And I just want to express my particular appreciation for one person, which is you, Akshata, who has done a fabulous job. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this, and look forward to all on Discord.
Thank you. Suhail, any final words?
Yes, I'll add a little bit. Sorry to keep everybody from the Saturday evening, but of course, Akshata, this is the third time that she's been instrumental in organizing this this conference, and at the back end, those you can't see Amit and Tamiran, who are running all the tech in the back. So thanks to all three. And of course, thank you to all participants, panel discussants, all the speakers, keynote from you, an amazing keynote this morning. Now, just a word about, well, one thing is I posted a link to a feedback form in the lounge channel. And it's really important if everybody could please fill in that form with your thoughts and your opinion on how this went and how we can improve in the future, because that's the only way in which we can, figure out what to do different the next time. Maybe there'll be a chance to meet in person next year. Let's see how things go. But it does seem like an online conference, it nevertheless has its place, just to be able to allow many more people to participate from many different corners of the country. And in the meantime, as mentioned in the morning, we'll keep our Discord server up and running. So we'll continue to be able to have a channel of communication about citizen science for biodiversity in India. The specific conference channels we might shut down, or not shut down, but rather disable. So you'll still be able to go and see the videos and click on the posters and so on. But we may, after a few days, maybe about a week, maybe disable commenting in those channels, so that there's not too much happening everywhere on the server. And we'll create most likely a new set of channels that are specifically about our more long-term discussions, maybe under different subject areas. And this is something that we need to work out. And if you have any questions suggestions for how we might best organize the Discord server for our continuing discussions and conversations, please post them in one of those channels. Maybe Lounge is a good place, or in the feedback form. So let's not just have this once a year, although that's also great. If we come together only once a year, that's better than nothing. But if we can continue discussing and continue telling each other what we're doing, giving little updates, encouraging each other, telling us some news, or even just telling us things that the rest of us should amplify. You have a new event going on, citizen science event or a project, let us know in the Discord, in the server, and give us a link to your Twitter post or Facebook or Insta or whatever, and the entire community hopefully will come together and help to amplify what you're trying to do. That's part of the purpose of this. Yuvan in the morning had some ideas for how the community as a whole could work together towards something meaningful. Maybe we'll take forward with him some of those ideas and come back in this server and discuss it more broadly with everybody, because after all, I think those are meant to be joint sort of community led things. So thanks again, and enough from me. Farida, would you like to say a few last words, and maybe Prabhakar at the end?
Well, I guess I just spoke quite a lot in the last panel session. So, I guess we should see how we can all get together at least once maybe I'm looking forward for a conference where we all meet physically and we have maybe much more discussions, side events and this kind of thing. Maybe we should try having one, aiming for that at least for once, and then maybe shift back to an online conference. But yes, I personally keep learning from all these conferences all the time. And I thank all the organizing committee members, the panelists were wonderful, the people who are joined on the chat channels, they have been wonderful, excellent questions being raised, and the posters are amazing. So I really want people to look at the posters because there's so much to learn from them. So yes, thank you everyone, and look forward to continuing this discussion.
Yeah, it's been a very, very interesting and exciting day for me. I've been staring at the screen, of course, which I don't like to do. But then the Yuan's talk, as well as the panel discussion, has really, raised very, very interesting and important questions for citizen science in our locale, in India, and things like that. I think we really, it's a time for introspection. That the Yuan's talk, as well as the final panel discussion, really has brought out very, very interesting questions about, is citizen science just contributing data to eBird or INAT or India Biodiversity Portal, or what is it? And what is its relevance to local communities, to local livelihoods, to local issues, to local, So it's been very, very, it's evoked a lot of introspection in me, saying, what is it that we're doing with citizen science, especially Yuan's and the final panel discussion. I thank you all for kind of igniting this. The panelists, much appreciate your perspectives. I hope we do introspect and see what we need to do with citizen science in India. Thank you very much. Of course, the organizing committee and my colleagues, and working with all of you was great fun, was went very, and thanks. Sohail.
So did you call on me, Prabhakar? That's it. We're done. Bye, everybody. Have a nice weekend, and but keep checking your phones and laptops, and keep interacting on Discord, and keep asking questions and giving suggestions. See you on Discord.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye.